My mother-in-law said, "Family doesn't need prenups," then handed her son a list of all my assets she looked up online. I should have known something was wrong when Damien's mom, Veronica, insisted on having dinner at her house the week after our engagement. Just the three of us. No dad, no siblings. She'd never wanted to spend time with me before. For 2 years of dating, she'd greeted me with tight smiles and comments about how Damien's ex-girlfriend Felicity was doing so well as a pediatrician. Now suddenly she was baking lasagna and asking about my childhood. Halfway through dinner, Veronica pulled out a manila folder. "I've been doing some research," she said sweetly. "Since you're joining our family, I wanted to understand your financial situation." The folder contained printouts. My salary from my marketing job, the value of my condo, my retirement accounts, my car's blue book price, even my late grandmother's estate distribution that I'd received 3 years ago. "How did you get this?" I asked. She waved her hand dismissively. "Public records, LinkedIn, a few strategic questions to mutual acquaintances. The important thing is," she pushed the papers toward Damien, "your future wife has considerably more assets than you do, sweetheart." Damien looked uncomfortable but said nothing. "Now, I know modern couples do prenups," Veronica continued, "but that's so cold, isn't it? So transactional. Family doesn't need legal contracts. Family trusts each other." She smiled at me. "You trust Damien, don't you?" "Of course," I said carefully. "Good. Then there's no need for any prenup discussion. You'll merge everything after the wedding. Joint accounts, joint property ownership. That's what marriage is." I noticed Damien still hadn't said anything. That night, I asked him about it. "Did you know your mom was going to do that?" He shrugged. "She's just looking out for our future." But whose future exactly? Over the next month, Veronica's involvement escalated. She wanted to be on our wedding planning committee. She suggested we sell my condo and use the equity as down payment on a house in her neighborhood. She asked detailed questions about my investment portfolio, taking notes. Then my sister pulled me aside at my bridal shower. "I saw Veronica talking to a real estate agent friend of hers," she said. "She was asking about liquidating property quickly after marriage." I hired a private investigator. What I found made my stomach drop. Damien's family business was drowning in debt. His father had made terrible investments before his death. Veronica had been living on credit cards and was 3 months from foreclosure. She'd already spent Damien's inheritance and now she needed a bailout. The night I confronted Damien with the PI report, he broke down crying. "She'd promised she'd pay me back," he sobbed. "She said once we were married and combined our finances, we could save the family home, save the business. It was supposed to be temporary. You were going to use my money without telling me? She said you'd understand. That family helps family." I canceled the wedding the next morning, but when I went to my bank that afternoon, I discovered something that made everything so much worse. 3 weeks earlier, Damien had added himself to my savings account. The banker showed me the paperwork with my signature, except I'd never signed anything. The signature was close, but the loop in my L was wrong. I always made it clockwise. This one went counterclockwise. "I need to see the video footage from that day," I demanded. The manager hesitated, then pulled it up. On the screen, Veronica walked in with a woman who looked like me from behind. Same height, same hair color, same build. The woman wore sunglasses and a face mask, claiming she had a terrible cold. She'd shown identification with my name on it and signed the documents. The whole thing took 11 minutes. "That's not me," I said, my voice shaking. The manager's face went pale. "We'll need to file a fraud report." I called the police from the parking lot. While waiting for them to arrive, I checked my account balance. $47,000 was missing, nearly everything from that account. I pulled up my credit monitoring app. 2 new credit cards had been opened in my name in the past month, both maxed out. Total fraudulent charges, $83,000. The detective who took my statement was a woman named Officer Rivera. She had kind eyes but a hard edge to her voice. "This is sophisticated identity theft," she said. "They've been planning this for a while. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight?" "Safe? Why wouldn't I be safe? Because whoever did this knows where you live, knows your routines, and has access to enough personal information to steal your identity. If they're desperate enough to commit fraud, they might be desperate enough to escalate." I called my sister. She picked me up within 20 minutes, her boyfriend Theo driving while she held my hand in the back seat. "You're staying with us," she said firmly. No arguments. That night, I got a text from Damien. "Please call me, we need to talk." I blocked his number. Then Veronica called from her phone. I let it go to voicemail. "Sweetheart, I know you're upset, but Damien is heartbroken. Can't we work this out? Family forgives. Call me back." I saved the voicemail for evidence. At 2 a.m., someone tried my front door. My neighbor texted me a photo from his security camera. It was Damien trying different keys in my lock. I forwarded it to Officer Rivera, who told me to file for a restraining order first thing in the morning. The next day, I met with a lawyer named Patricia Huang. She was in her 50s, wore sharp suits, and had a reputation for destroying opposing counsel. "This is going to get messy," she said after reviewing everything, "but we're going to bury them." She filed for the restraining order, filed criminal complaints for identity theft, fraud, and forgery, sent cease and desist letters, started the process of freezing assets and tracing the stolen money. 2 days later, Veronica showed up at my sister's apartment. I watched through the doorbell camera as she rang repeatedly, then started pounding on the door. "I know you're in there," she shouted. "We need to discuss this like adults. You're ruining my son's life over a misunderstanding." My sister called the police. Veronica was still there when they arrived, demanding they make me come outside. The officers explained the restraining order. She called them fascists who didn't understand family values. That evening, I got an email from someone named Felicity. Yes, that Felicity. Damien's perfect ex-girlfriend. "I don't know if you'll read this," she wrote, "but I thought you should know what happened to me. Damien and I dated for 3 years. His mother was lovely at first. Then she started talking about combining finances, moving into her neighborhood, helping with the family business. When I suggested a prenup, everything changed. Within a month, Damien broke up with me. Later, I discovered someone had tried to take out a loan in my name. The application was denied because I'd frozen my credit after a previous identity theft attempt. I could never prove it was them, but the application listed Veronica as a reference and used information only Damien would know about me. Be careful. They've done this before. I forwarded the email to Officer Rivera and Patricia. The investigation expanded. The fraud division found that the woman who'd impersonated me at the bank was a cousin of Veronica's, someone who'd done similar schemes before. She'd been paid $3,000 for the job. The fake ID had been made by a contact of Damien's from college. Patricia discovered that this wasn't even Veronica's first time. She'd been sued twice before by her late husband's business partners. Both cases were settled quietly with NDAs. She'd also encouraged Damien's older brother to marry a wealthy woman. Then that marriage ended in a messy divorce where the woman lost half her inheritance. This is a pattern, Patricia said. A family business model, essentially. They target wealthy partners, extract assets, then move on. The criminal trial was set for 6 months out. In the meantime, I had to rebuild my financial life. The credit card companies eventually wrote off the fraudulent charges, but it took months of disputes and paperwork. The bank reimbursed the stolen $47,000 after their investigation confirmed fraud. But my credit score was trashed. My sense of security was worse. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Chen, not the common kind of therapy name, but Chen. She specialized in financial abuse and trauma. What you experienced was intimate partner fraud, she explained. It's more common than people think, and it's devastating because it combines financial violation with emotional betrayal. I cried through most of our early sessions, not just about the money, but about how stupid I felt. How could I not see it? All the signs were there. Veronica's sudden interest, Damien's evasiveness about his finances, the pressure to merge everything quickly. You trusted someone you loved, Dr. Chen said gently. That's not stupidity. That's human. But it felt like stupidity when I ran into Damien's brother at the grocery store. He looked uncomfortable, quickly turning his cart around. Wait, I called after him. Did you know? He stopped, wouldn't look at me. Mom said you were family now, that what's yours was ours. Did you know about the fraud? He trailed off. I thought you'd agreed to help. I didn't know they'd forged anything, but you knew they were planning to take my money. Silence. Your family destroyed my credit, stole from me, and tried to trap me in a marriage built on lies, and you just went along with it. He finally met my eyes. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I told Mom this was too far. But she doesn't listen to me. Then you should have warned me. He left without another word. The restraining order hearing happened 3 weeks after I filed. Damien showed up with a lawyer, claiming I was overreacting to a misunderstanding. His lawyer argued that engaged couples often share finances, and that I was being vindictive after a broken engagement. Patricia destroyed that argument in under 5 minutes. She presented the forged bank documents, the fraudulent credit cards, the police reports, the video footage of the impersonation, Damien's attempted break-in at my condo, Veronica's harassment at my sister's apartment. The judge granted a 3-year restraining order. Both Damien and Veronica had to stay 500 feet away from me, my home, my workplace, and my family. As we left the courthouse, I saw Veronica in the hallway. She mouthed something at me. I couldn't hear it, but I could read her lips. You'll regret this. The criminal trial started in November. The prosecution had a solid case. The forged signatures, the fake ID, the accomplice cousin who'd agreed to testify in exchange for a lesser charge, bank records showing the money trail from my accounts to Veronica's creditors. Damien's defense was that he'd been manipulated by his mother. He claimed he didn't know about the identity theft, that he'd only asked to be added to my account because we were engaged and planning a future together. His lawyer painted him as another victim of Veronica's schemes. The prosecution called me to testify on day 3. Walking into that courtroom felt like being stripped naked. Every detail of my finances, my relationship, my private life was now public record. The defense attorney tried to make me look like a gold digger who targeted Damien specifically because his mother had money, then backed out when the family needed help. Patricia had prepared me for this. They'll try to flip the narrative, she'd said. Make you the villain. Don't get emotional. Stick to facts. I took a breath and answered calmly. I earned every dollar in those accounts through my own work. I had no idea Damien's family was in financial trouble until I hired an investigator, and I ended the engagement because I discovered he was planning to use my assets without my knowledge to bail out his mother's debts. The fraud came after that, the defense attorney pressed. Isn't it true you refused to help your future mother-in-law when she was facing foreclosure? I refused to have my identity stolen and my accounts drained without consent. Those are different things. By day 5, the jury had heard everything. The accomplice cousin described how Veronica had recruited her, provided my personal information, and coached her on how to impersonate me. The bank manager testified about the forged signatures. Felicity testified about her similar experience with the family. The prosecutor's closing argument was devastating. This isn't about a family helping each other. This is about predators who targeted a young woman because she had assets they wanted to steal. They planned it methodically. They executed it precisely. And when she discovered their scheme, they harassed her, attempted to break into her home, and violated a restraining order. This is fraud. This is identity theft. And these defendants need to be held accountable. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Veronica got 4 years in federal prison for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Damien got 2 years plus 5 years probation. The accomplice cousin got 18 months. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. I'd spent 9 months fighting this case. 9 months living with my sister. 9 months jumping at every unexpected noise, checking my credit report obsessively, having nightmares about Veronica showing up at my door. The restitution hearing came next. Patricia argued for full compensation plus damages. The court ordered them to repay not just the stolen money, but also my legal fees, credit repair costs, therapy expenses, and $50,000 in emotional distress damages. Total, $247,000. You won't see most of that money, Patricia warned me. They don't have it. That's why they targeted you in the first place. She was right. Veronica's house was foreclosed. The family business was liquidated. Damien's assets amounted to a 10-year-old car and about $3,000 in a checking account. The court set up a payment plan where they'd pay me $200 a month for the rest of their lives. I'd be 94 before I collected the full amount, but I didn't care about the money anymore. What I cared about was that they couldn't do this to someone else, that there was a public record of their crimes, that the next woman Damien dated could Google him and find news articles about his fraud conviction. I moved back into my condo in January, changed all the locks, installed a security system with cameras, got a large dog named Bruno who barked at strangers, started rebuilding my life piece by piece. My sister helped me repaint the bedroom, erasing any memory of Damien ever being there. My friends threw me a divorce without the marriage party where we burned the wedding invitations I'd never sent and drank champagne. But the nightmares continued. I'd dream about standing at an altar, Damien taking my hand while Veronica stood behind him with a knife. I'd dream about signing documents I couldn't read, my signature appearing on papers I'd never seen. I'd dream about checking my bank account and seeing nothing but zeros. Dr. Chen said it was PTSD. Financial trauma affects your sense of safety and control, she explained. Your brain is trying to process a betrayal that hit you on multiple levels: romantic, financial, and familial. I started attending a support group for victims of financial abuse. I heard stories worse than mine. A woman whose husband had taken out a second mortgage on their house without telling her, then gambled it all away. A man whose business partner had embezzled $300,000, forcing him into bankruptcy. A mother whose son had stolen her retirement fund to support his drug addiction. Compared to them, I'd gotten off easy. I was young, employed, had a support system. I could rebuild. But sitting in that circle every Tuesday night, I realized something. Betrayal is betrayal. It doesn't matter if someone steals $500 or $500,000, the violation cuts the same. 6 months after the trial, I got a letter from Damien. It had been forwarded through Patricia's office since he couldn't contact me directly. She'd reviewed it first, confirming it didn't violate the restraining order. I know you'll never forgive me, he wrote, and you shouldn't. What we did, was unforgivable. I've had a lot of time to think in here, and I've come to realize how deeply I betrayed you. My mother raised me to believe family comes first, no matter what. That loyalty to blood supersedes everything else. I see now how toxic that was. How it turned me into someone who could rationalize stealing from the person I claimed to love. I'm writing this because my therapist said I need to take accountability without expecting anything in return. You deserved honesty and partnership. Instead, I gave you lies and theft. I'm sorry. Not because I want forgiveness or reduction of consequences, but because you should know that you weren't wrong to trust me. I was wrong to abuse that trust. I hope you're building a better life. I hope you never think of me again. I hope you find someone who actually deserves you. I read it 3 times. Then I filed it away and never responded. He didn't deserve my forgiveness. He certainly didn't deserve my reply. The letter was about his healing, not mine, and I refused to be part of his redemption story. By the time summer rolled around, I'd been promoted at work. My credit score had climbed back to 720. I'd paid off the therapy bills and security system installation. Bruno had grown into a 90-pound German shepherd who scared away anyone who looked at me wrong. I was okay. Not healed, but okay. Then one evening I got a Facebook message from a woman named Whitney. She'd found me through news articles about the trial. I'm dating Damien's brother, she wrote. The family keeps talking about how you overreacted and ruined their lives. But I looked up the court records. I needed to know the truth. Thank you for fighting back. Because of you, I know what I'm dealing with. I'm ending things with him tomorrow. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I wrote back. Get your credit frozen first. Check your bank accounts. Change your passwords. Document everything. If you need help, call this number. I attached Patricia's contact information. Whitney thanked me and signed off. I never heard from her again, but I hoped she got out safely. That's when I realized the full scope of what Veronica had built. Not just a scam, but a legacy. She'd raised her sons to believe women were resources to be mined. That love was a transaction. That family loyalty meant protecting each other's crimes. And I'd broken that cycle. Not just for me, but for every woman who'd Google Damien's name in the future. For every woman who'd see Veronica's mugshot and think twice. I started a blog, anonymous at first, sharing my story in detail. The warning signs I'd missed, the tactics they'd used, the legal steps I'd taken, the resources that had helped me recover. Within a month, I had 50,000 followers. Women sharing their own stories of financial abuse. Men realizing they'd been raised with similar toxic values. Adult children of con artists trying to break free from family expectations. One woman wrote, "My boyfriend's mother acts just like Veronica. Thank you for giving me the vocabulary to explain why it feels wrong." Another, "I was about to marry someone whose family was pressuring me to combine finances. After reading your story, I insisted on a prenup. He broke up with me. Bullet dodged." The blog became a book deal. My literary agent said publishers were hungry for true crime stories with practical advice. We sold it at auction for 6 figures. I donated half the advance to organizations that helped victims of financial abuse. The book came out 2 years after Damien's conviction. The title, Family Doesn't Need Prenups, How I Survived Identity Theft by My Fiancé's Family. It hit the bestseller list in its first week. I did a book tour, spoke at women's conferences, started a nonprofit that provided free legal consultations to victims of intimate partner financial fraud. Patricia joined as pro bono counsel. During one event, a woman approached me after my talk. She was in her 60s, impeccably dressed. "My daughter was dating Damien before you," she said quietly. "Before Felicity even. She never told me what happened, but she had a nervous breakdown when he left her, withdrew from college. It took years for her to recover. I always wondered what that family did to her. Now I know. I gave her my card. If she ever wants to talk, I'm here. The messages kept coming. Dozens of women who'd encountered Veronica's family over the years. A woman whose sister had briefly dated Damien in high school and had her babysitting money stolen. A former neighbor who'd lent Veronica $10,000 and never saw it again. A business associate of the late husband who'd been scammed out of an investment. Veronica wasn't just a con artist. She was a career criminal who'd spent decades perfecting her craft. And I'd been her most ambitious target yet, but also her last. With a public record of her crimes, news articles, a best-selling book, and a nonprofit dedicated to preventing similar fraud, she couldn't operate anymore. Her name was Poison. Her sons' names were Poison. The family business model was destroyed. I thought that would be the end of it. Close the chapter, move forward, build something good from something terrible. But life had other plans. 3 years after the trial, I met someone new. His name was Anthony, and he owned a small bookstore downtown. He'd read my book and wanted to host a signing event. Professional at first, then coffee afterward, then dinner, then a slow, careful relationship built on complete transparency. I told him everything on our third date, the whole story. Not the public version from the book, but the private details. The nightmares, the paranoia, the fact that I still checked my credit report every week and had trust issues that might never fully heal. I'm a lot of baggage, I said. Anthony reached across the table and took my hand. Everyone's got baggage. You've just unpacked yours, organized it, and turned it into a nonprofit. I laughed despite myself. 6 months in, he introduced me to his family. His mother was warm and kind, nothing like Veronica, but when she offered to help us look at houses together, I felt my chest tighten. Too soon? Anthony asked later. Maybe a little. That's okay. We'll go at your pace. And he meant it. No pressure, no manipulation, no secret debts or hidden agendas. Just a steady, honest partnership where we kept separate accounts, split expenses fairly, and built something together without anyone trying to steal anything. I'd never experienced a healthy relationship before. I didn't realize how much energy I'd been spending on guard duty until I felt safe enough to lower the walls. We got engaged 2 years later. Anthony proposed during a quiet dinner at home, just the two of us and Bruno. The ring was beautiful but modest. The proposal was simple. I love you. I love your strength. I love your complications. Will you marry me? I said yes. Then I said, we're getting a prenup. He didn't even hesitate. Obviously. Already talked to a lawyer. That's when I knew he was the right one. Our prenup was thorough and fair. Separate property clearly defined. Agreement on how we'd handle shared expenses. Provisions for if either of us became disabled or died. Exit clauses that protected both of us equally. It took 3 months to negotiate and cost us $4,000 in legal fees. Money well spent. We got married in a small ceremony at the bookstore where we'd met. My sister was my maid of honor. Anthony's best friend officiated. Bruno wore a bow tie. There were maybe 30 people there, all friends and family who'd supported me through the trial and recovery. No Veronica, no Damien, no toxic family members demanding access to our finances. Just love and trust and legally documented financial boundaries. The reception was casual, pizza and beer, a playlist instead of a DJ, speeches that made us laugh and cry. My sister told the story of how I'd lived on her couch for months, gradually healing. Anthony's mother talked about how her son had finally found someone who matched his integrity. Patricia gave a toast that brought down the house. To the bride and groom, may your marriage be built on love, respect, and ironclad legal agreements. Everyone cheered. That night, after all the guests had left, Anthony and I sat in the bookstore surrounded by flowers and empty pizza boxes. We did it, he said. We really did. No interference, no drama, no family members trying to steal your condo. I laughed. The bar is literally on the floor. And yet, so many people can't clear it. He was right. My inbox was still full of messages from women dealing with financial abuse. My nonprofit fielded dozens of calls every week. The problem was bigger than Veronica's family. It was systemic. So I expanded, hired staff for the nonprofit, developed educational programs about financial literacy and abuse prevention, started lobbying for stronger laws around identity theft and intimate partner fraud. The work was exhausting but necessary. Every woman I helped felt like a small victory against the Veronicas of the world. Every law that passed felt like justice delayed but not denied. 5 years after the trial, Veronica was released from prison. She'd served her full sentence with no early parole. The judge had denied it twice, citing lack of remorse. I got a notification from the Victim Services Program. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't terrified. For weeks after her release, I jumped at every shadow. Bruno sensed my anxiety and barely left my side. Anthony installed additional security cameras. I started varying my routines, taking different routes to work. But Veronica never came near me. The restraining order was still in effect. And more than that, she was radioactive now. No one would give her credit. No one would hire her. Her name brought up pages of search results about fraud and theft. She'd destroyed her own reputation so thoroughly that she couldn't scam anyone anymore. According to mutual acquaintances, she moved 2 states over and took a job cleaning houses under an assumed name. Damien's brother had cut her off completely. Damien himself was still in prison, serving the remainder of his sentence. I'd won. Completely. Totally. Her life was ruined. Her family was fractured. Her legacy was as a cautionary tale. So why didn't I feel better? Dr. Chen and I talked about it in therapy. Revenge isn't actually satisfying, she explained. You're not a vengeful person. You're a person who wanted justice and got it. But justice doesn't undo the harm. It doesn't give you back the time you lost, or the innocence you had before. She was right. Winning the case didn't erase the betrayal. Veronica going to prison didn't heal my trust issues. The book and the nonprofit didn't make me whole again. What healed me was boring, daily things. Anthony making coffee every morning. Bruno sleeping at the foot of our bed. My sister calling just to chat. Work projects that had nothing to do with fraud. Weekends where I didn't think about Veronica at all. Recovery wasn't a dramatic moment. It was 1,000 small moments of normalcy. 6 years after everything started, I got pregnant. Unplanned but wanted. Anthony and I had talked about kids someday, but we'd been focused on building our life together first. When I told him, he cried. Happy tears. We're going to be parents? Apparently. Oh God, we need to childproof the bookstore. I laughed. The baby won't be crawling for months. I know, but still. He was already in preparation mode, reading parenting books and researching the best car seats. His enthusiasm was infectious. But I had moments of fear. What if I passed my trauma down to our child? What if I was too paranoid to be a good parent? What if I raised them to never trust anyone? Dr. Chen reassured me. You're not your trauma. You're a whole person who experienced trauma. Your child will have a mother who's strong, careful, and knows how to set boundaries. Those are good things. I gave birth to a daughter in the spring. We named her Claire, after my grandmother who'd left me the inheritance that had started this whole mess. The one good thing Veronica's greed had revealed, I knew exactly who I could trust. Claire was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, Anthony's eyes, and apparently my stubborn streak based on how she fought sleep. Holding her in the hospital, I made a silent promise. No one would ever use her. No one would ever steal from her. No one would ever make her feel like her worth was tied to her assets. My sister visited with flowers and a stuffed elephant bigger than the baby. She's beautiful, she said, tears streaming down her face. And she's safe. That's what matters. She was right. Claire was safe in ways I hadn't been. She'd grow up in a home where finances were transparent, where love wasn't transactional, where family meant support, not exploitation. When Claire was 3 months old, I got a letter from Damien's brother. He'd seen the birth announcement online. Congratulations, he wrote. I know I have no right to say this, but I'm glad you found happiness. What my family did to you was unforgivable. I've spent years in therapy trying to unlearn the toxic things my mother taught us. I'm engaged now, and we have a prenup. My fiancé insisted on it after reading your book. Thank you for sharing your story. It helped me see how warped my understanding of relationships was. I showed the letter to Anthony. Should I respond? Do you want to? I thought about it. Maybe. Just to say I'm glad he's getting help. I sent a brief email. Thank you for writing. I'm glad you're building a healthier life. That takes courage. I didn't forgive him. I didn't offer friendship. But I acknowledged his growth because that mattered too. The email stopped after that. We went our separate ways. Claire grew into a toddler, then a preschooler. She was bright and funny and completely unaware that her mother had once been the victim of the elaborate fraud scheme. That was intentional. I didn't want her childhood shadowed by my past. But when she started asking questions about why we had so many locks on the doors and cameras everywhere, I gave her an age-appropriate explanation. Mommy had some people try to steal from her once. We used these to stay safe. Did they go to jail? Yes. Good. Simple as that in her mind. Bad people got caught. Justice worked. The world was safe. I hoped she'd get to keep that innocence longer than I had. Anthony's bookstore expanded. He opened a second location and hired more staff. We were comfortable financially. Not wealthy, but stable. We kept our promise of separate accounts for our individual assets, but had a joint account for household expenses and Claire's future. It was functional, unsexy, exactly what marriage should be. On our 5th anniversary, Anthony surprised me with a weekend trip to a bed and breakfast upstate. His parents watched Claire and Bruno. We spent 2 days sleeping late, reading books, and not talking about fraud or nonprofits or anything stressful. Thank you, I said on the last night, for being boring. He raised an eyebrow. Boring? I mean it as a compliment. You're predictably kind, consistently honest, reliably present. It's the most boring, wonderful thing that's ever happened to me. He kissed me. I love you too, weirdo. We drove home the next day to find Claire had learned a new word from Anthony's mother. Share. She'd been practicing all weekend. Share, she demanded, pointing at my sandwich. Okay, you can have a bite. She munched happily, then pointed at Anthony's phone. Share. No, sweetheart, phones aren't for sharing, she pouted. But Daddy share. Anthony laughed. She's got a point. I do share with you. That's different. We're married. Share, Claire insisted, not understanding the nuance. It struck me then how much I'd have to teach her about boundaries, about the difference between generosity and exploitation, about when to share and when to protect yourself. It wouldn't be an easy conversation, but it would be necessary. The nonprofit celebrated its 5th anniversary with a gala fundraiser. We'd helped over 2,000 victims of financial abuse, secured pro bono legal representation for 500, and lobbied for law changes in 12 states. Patricia gave a speech about our victories. Former clients shared their stories of recovery. I stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd. Survivors, advocates, attorneys, law enforcement, all fighting the same fight. 5 years ago, I thought I was alone, I said. I thought what happened to me was uniquely humiliating. But the more I shared my story, the more I realized how common this is. How many people are being financially abused by partners, family members, people they trust. This nonprofit exists because we refuse to let that abuse happen in silence anymore. We refuse to let victims feel ashamed. We refuse to let perpetrators operate without consequences. The applause was thunderous. After the event, a young woman approached me. She looked maybe 25, dressed professionally. My fiancé's mother keeps asking about my student loan debt, she said. She wants to know how much I owe so the family can help. But something feels off. I knew that feeling. Trust your instincts. But what if I'm being paranoid? What if she's just being nice? Nice people don't need to know your exact debt amount. Nice people offer support without requiring financial disclosure. If something feels off, investigate before you're legally tied to this family. She nodded slowly. Thank you. I gave her my card. If you need help, call me. That was the difference between me and Veronica's other victims. I wasn't staying silent. I was standing in the gap for the next woman, the next man, the next person who needed to know they weren't crazy for feeling uncomfortable. 8 years after the trial, Damien was released from prison. I got the notification and felt nothing. No fear, no anger. Just a distant acknowledgement that a chapter from my past was officially closed. He didn't try to contact me. According to the sparse information I found online, he'd moved across the country and was working construction, kept his head down, stayed off social media. Maybe he'd actually learned something, or maybe he was just waiting for the news articles to fade from the first page of Google results. Either way, he was no longer my problem. Claire started second grade that fall. She came home one day with a school form. "Mommy, teacher says you need to fill this out for emergency contacts." I looked at the form. Standard stuff, but one question made me pause. In case of financial emergency, who should we contact? I left it blank. Anthony noticed. "No one you'd trust for that?" "My sister." But I'm not putting anyone on a school form with access to Claire. Not after everything. He understood. That was the beautiful thing about him. He always understood. Some of my paranoia would never fully fade. I'd always be the person who checked locks twice, who kept separate accounts, who read every document before signing. But I'd turned that vigilance into wisdom. I taught financial literacy classes at the local community center, showed people how to spot red flags, how to protect their credit, how to document everything, how to leave safely if they found themselves in an abusive financial situation. One student, an older woman named Dorothy, stayed after class one evening. "My husband died last year," she said. "My son has been helping me manage the estate, but money keeps disappearing from my accounts." My stomach dropped. "Have you talked to him about it?" "He says I'm confused, that I'm spending it and forgetting, but I keep records. I know something's wrong." I gave her the number for Elder Financial Abuse Services. "Call them tomorrow. This is serious." She did. Within a month, they'd uncovered that her son had been systematically stealing her savings, draining $80,000 over 2 years. He was arrested. She got a court-appointed fiduciary to manage her finances. "You saved my future," she told me later. "I would have lost everything." Stories like hers kept me going. Every person helped. Every perpetrator caught. Every system changed to better protect victims. The work mattered. When Claire turned 10, she asked about my book. She'd seen it on the bookshelf, asked why Mommy's name was on the cover. I deflected before, but she was old enough now for the truth. I sat her down and told her an edited version, that someone I'd planned to marry had tried to steal from me, that his mother had helped, that I'd stopped the wedding and taken them to court, that they'd gone to prison. "Were you scared?" she asked, terrified. "But you did it anyway?" "I didn't have a choice. Sometimes you have to be brave even when you're scared." She hugged me fiercely. "I'm proud of you, Mommy." I held her close, thinking about all the things I'd survived to get to this moment. The fraud, the trial, the nightmares, the slow rebuild of trust. All of it had led here, to a moment where my daughter looked at me with pride instead of pity. That night, Anthony found me crying in our bedroom. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Everything's actually right. That's what's overwhelming." He pulled me close. "You've earned this happiness. You know that, right?" "Maybe. Or maybe happiness wasn't something you earned. Maybe it was something you built, piece by piece, after someone tried to tear it all down." The nonprofit hit a milestone the following year. 10,000 victims served. We'd grown from my living room operation to a staff of 15, offices in 4 cities, and partnerships with legal aid societies across the country. We'd helped pass legislation in 20 states strengthening penalties for intimate partner financial fraud. Veronica's name came up occasionally in our training materials, the case study, the cautionary tale, the example of how far predators would go. But she wasn't the focus anymore. The focus was prevention, education, empowerment, making sure the next generation of young women and men knew the warning signs, knew their rights, knew they deserved partnerships built on transparency, not transactions. I spoke at a college about financial abuse awareness. A student raised her hand. "How do you know when someone's genuinely having financial troubles versus when they're trying to scam you?" Good question. Genuine financial troubles come with humility and boundaries. Someone who's genuinely struggling won't pressure you to merge accounts immediately. They won't research your assets without permission. They won't forge your signature. They'll be honest about their situation and respect your need to protect yourself. Scammers, on the other hand, use urgency, guilt, and secrecy. They make you feel like you're the problem for having boundaries. Another student. "What if it's your family doing it?" That's the hardest situation, because we're taught that family is sacred, that blood is thicker than water. But the full phrase is actually, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb." The bonds we choose can be stronger than the bonds we're born into. If your family is exploiting you financially, you have every right to protect yourself, even if that means cutting them off. The room was silent, heavy. "I know that's hard to hear," I continued. "I know some of you have family members who've helped you, supported you, loved you. I'm not saying everyone's family is toxic. I'm saying that love and loyalty shouldn't cost you your financial security. Real family, chosen or biological, respects your boundaries." After the talk, a line of students waited to speak with me privately. 3 of them described situations eerily similar to what I'd experienced: parents or partners requesting financial information, pressure to combine accounts, guilt trips about not helping family. I referred them all to resources, gave them Patricia's contact info, made sure they knew they weren't alone. That was the real victory. Not Veronica in prison, not Damien paying restitution he couldn't afford, but breaking the silence that allowed financial abuse to flourish. Claire turned 13, became interested in true crime podcasts, discovered my book on her own and read it cover to cover before I could stop her. "Mom," she said one evening, "I Googled Damien. There are news articles with pictures." My chest tightened. "How do you feel about that?" "Angry. That he tried to hurt you. That his mom was so awful. It was a long time ago. But it still affects us. We have all those security cameras because of them. You still check your credit every week. Dad says you wake up from nightmares sometimes. I hadn't realized she'd noticed so much. You're right. It does still affect me. Trauma doesn't just disappear because you won in court. It changes how you see the world. Is that bad? Sometimes. But it also made me more careful, more aware. It taught me that trust has to be earned, not freely given. And it led me to start the nonprofit, which has helped a lot of people. She processed this. So something good came from something bad? Eventually. But it took years. And a lot of therapy. She hugged me. I'm still proud of you. I'm proud of you too, for asking hard questions, for being compassionate but cautious. Those are good qualities. Anthony opened a third bookstore location. Business was thriving in ways neither of us had anticipated. We finally bought a house. Not in Veronica's neighborhood, obviously. A craftsman in a quiet area with good schools and a fenced yard for Bruno's successor, a young German shepherd named Eleanor we'd gotten after Bruno passed at age 12. The house purchase was complicated. Because of my history, I insisted on having our real estate attorney review every document, made sure both our names were on the deed equally, set up the mortgage so either of us could afford the payments independently if something happened to the other. Anthony never complained about my paranoia. He understood it was how I stayed safe. We hosted Thanksgiving that year. My sister and her family, Anthony's parents, a few close friends. Claire helped cook, learning her grandmother's recipes, the house filled with laughter and the smell of turkey and pie. Looking around the table, I realized this was what Veronica had tried to take from me. Not just money, but this. The possibility of building a life with people who genuinely cared. The chance to create new traditions. The freedom to trust again. She'd failed. During dessert, Anthony stood and raised his glass. I want to make a toast. To my incredible wife, who survived something unthinkable and turned it into purpose. To my daughter, who's growing up with the wisdom her mother earned the hard way. And to all of us, for choosing each other as family. Everyone clinked glasses. My sister caught my eye across the table and mouthed, "We made it. We had. Despite everything. Despite Veronica and Damien and the fraud and the trial and the nightmares, we'd built lives worth living." That night, after everyone had left and Claire was asleep, I found myself in my office looking at old case files. Photos from the trial. The forged signatures. The mugshots. Evidence of the worst period of my life, preserved in manila folders. Anthony found me there. Why do you keep those? Reminder, I guess, of what I survived. You don't need reminders. You lived it. He was right. I grabbed the folders and walked them out to the fire pit in our backyard. One by one, I fed the papers to the flames. The forged signatures curled and blackened. The photographs dissolved into ash. The court documents crumbled into nothing. Anthony stood beside me, his hand in mine. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I'm sure. I don't need to carry this anymore. The story exists in my book. The nonprofit continues the work. But me personally, I'm done living in that moment." We watched the fire burn down to embers. The smoke rose into the night sky, carrying away the last physical remnants of what Veronica had done. I couldn't erase the experience from my memory, couldn't undo the trauma or heal the old wounds completely, but I could choose what I carried forward. And I chose this. The quiet house behind me, the man beside me, the daughter sleeping safely upstairs, the work that gave meaning to the pain, the knowledge that I'd survived and built something beautiful from the ashes. Veronica had tried to steal my future. Instead, she'd forced me to fight for it. And in fighting, I'd discovered exactly how strong I was. The fire died down. We went inside, locked the doors, set the alarm, checked on Claire, went to bed in a house we owned free and clear with separate accounts that no one could touch, and love that didn't require contracts because it was freely given. I'd won, not in court, though that helped, not through revenge, though justice mattered. I'd won by refusing to let what happened define my capacity for trust, by building a life so full of genuine love that Veronica's betrayal became just one chapter in a much longer story. Claire graduated high school with honors, got accepted to several colleges with full academic scholarships. She chose to study law with a focus on consumer protection and financial fraud. "Following in your footsteps," she said. "You don't have to. You can do anything." I know, but this matters. After reading your book and seeing the nonprofit's work, I want to help people like you help them. Is that okay? My eyes filled with tears. More than okay. She went off to college, brilliant and cautious and kind. Everything I'd hoped she'd be. Not damaged by my trauma, but informed by it. Not paranoid, but appropriately careful. Not cynical, but realistic about human nature. The nonprofit continued growing. We partnered with banks to create better fraud detection systems, worked with law enforcement to improve training on financial abuse cases, developed educational materials for high schools about healthy financial boundaries and relationships. And every year on the anniversary of my broken engagement, I took the day off. Not to wallow, but to celebrate. To remember that the worst day of my life had ultimately led to the best years. 15 years after everything happened, I got an unexpected email from Felicity. Yes, that Felicity. We'd corresponded briefly during the trial, but hadn't stayed in touch. "I don't know if you remember me," she wrote, "but I wanted you to know I just got engaged. To a man who respects boundaries, who has a healthy relationship with his mother, who suggested a prenup before I even brought it up. I don't think I could have gotten here without your example. Thank you for fighting back. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for showing us all that we don't have to accept abuse as the price of love." I replied, "Congratulations. You deserve happiness and safety. Both are possible." She sent me a wedding invitation months later. I didn't attend. It felt too weird, but I sent a gift, a copy of my book inscribed with, "To Felicity. May your marriage be built on transparency, trust, and a really good prenup." She sent a thank you note with a photo of her and her new husband holding the book and laughing. "It's already in our prenup that if either of us becomes a Veronica, the other gets everything and all the pets." I laughed. It felt good to laugh about it, to have moved far enough past the trauma that it became dark humor instead of open wound. Anthony and I celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary with a trip to Italy. Claire watched the house and both dogs. We spent 2 weeks eating pasta, drinking wine, and not checking our phones. On our last night in Rome, sitting at a sidewalk cafe, Anthony said, "Do you ever think about what life would have been like if you'd married Damien?" "Sometimes. In nightmares." Serious question, though. I thought about it. I'd probably be divorced by now. Broke. Maybe with my own version of your mother's manipulation. I definitely wouldn't have started the nonprofit or written the book. I might have just faded, became smaller and smaller until there was nothing left. Instead, you became magnificent. I smiled. I became careful, which led to confident, which led to purposeful. Not sure about magnificent. I'm sure. You saved thousands of people, changed laws, raised an amazing daughter, built a life that makes you happy. That's pretty magnificent. We clinked wine glasses and watched the sunset over the Tiber. The next day, we flew home. Back to reality. Back to the nonprofit and the bookstores and the comfortable rhythm of long marriage. Back to the life I'd fought so hard to build and protect. My phone lit up with messages. The nonprofit had just secured a major grant. A documentary crew wanted to interview me about financial abuse awareness. Claire had aced her law school entrance exam. Good news. All good news. I looked out the plane window as we descended toward home. Somewhere out there, Veronica was living her diminished life. Damien was probably still trying to rebuild his reputation. The accomplice cousin had likely found new ways to make money illegally, but they weren't my problem anymore. They were cautionary tales, examples in training materials, names in court records, nothing more. I'd moved on, not by forgetting, but by growing beyond what they tried to do to me, by turning victimization into advocacy, pain into purpose, fear into wisdom. The plane touched down. Anthony squeezed my hand. Home, where my daughter was waiting, where my work mattered, where my past informed my present without poisoning it, where I could sleep peacefully without wondering if someone was stealing from me, where trust was earned slowly and kept carefully and never ever taken for granted. 20 years after Veronica had pulled out that manila folder at dinner, I finally understood something important. She hadn't just shown me how predatory people could be. She'd forced me to discover how powerful I was, how resilient, how capable of transformation. She'd tried to take everything. Instead, she'd given me proof that I could survive anything. And I had. I really, truly had. We drove home from the airport. The house looked exactly as we'd left it. Solid, secure, ours. No one could take it without a fight. And after everything I'd been through, I knew exactly how to fight. I unlocked the door. Eleanor barked her greeting. Claire called out from the kitchen that she'd made dinner. Anthony carried our suitcases upstairs. Ordinary moments, normal life, the kind of peaceful, boring existence that people who haven't had everything threatened take for granted. But I never took it for granted. Not for a single day. Because I knew exactly how much it cost to build, how much it took to protect, how valuable it was to have a life where the only person with access to your bank account was you, and maybe your spouse, who proved their trustworthiness over years, not weeks. That night, lying in bed, I thought about that dinner 20 years ago, about young, naive me sitting across from Veronica, looking at printouts of my assets, not understanding yet that I was prey. If I could go back and tell that version of myself one thing, it would be this. The betrayal is coming. The pain is real. But you survive it. You do more than survive. You transform it into something